Hey, everybody. Welcome to Thrive Today podcast. Thrilled to have you to join us. And I'm thrilled we've switched roles. And I'm sitting here with the amazing Natalie Born, who is our media host. But today we're switching seats,
That's right.
and I get to talk to you about some of the amazing things that you do. And I love that, if you don't know Natalie, she is a strategist. She is the queen of innovation, and she is actually the voice behind Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. She has her very own podcast and has some excellent things to share on that. But today, we're going to talk about something that's going to get into a little more of your personal story and some of the seasons of change that you have
Yes.
experiences and the challenges that you have had even recently. So, welcome to the
Thank
Thrive
you.
Today
Thank you for having
podcast.
me.
So let's start with this because we're gathering all of this from your recent article and the personal turning point that you had.
Mhm.
You say that you were stuck between the proverbial rock and a hard place, and there you were, and you're trying to decide whether to take on a very difficult leadership challenge.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that moment because many of us have been in that hot seat. And what was going through your mind, and how did you evaluate that opportunity?
Yeah. So I was working at an organization where I honestly loved my role. I felt like I hit my dream job. And the CIO came to me and said, "Hey, we need you to stand up this other area. We've never stood it up before like this. Don't even know what we're in for. We don't even know how deep the rabbit hole goes, but we need your help." And I honestly, part of me wanted to stay really safe in my comfort zone. Um, I think we've all had those moments where it's felt safe and good, and so we did not want to leap out. But the more I prayed about it, the more I wanted to take on this opportunity. And so, man, I did not know. Nobody told me what I was getting into, but I had about 100 project managers that were dotted line reporting into me. And we had to take this whole organization and figure out how to transform it. Not only were we going through a digital transformation, but we were going through a cultural transformation at the same exact time. And it felt pretty intense in that moment to take on that size of a role and then that number of people asking them to take this change journey with us. It wasn't easy.
And those are the kind of challenges that really help determine who we are.
Yeah.
And so there are traditional leaders, and then there
Mhm.
are exponential leaders. So let's talk about the weight
Yeah.
of stepping into what it means to be an exponential leader.
Yeah. When you think about exponential leaders, they're constantly not only pushing you out beyond what you think is possible, but they're teaching you kind of how to go out onto that ledge. I mean, I think oftentimes, I always think about my kids when they took Krav Maga, right? The very first thing that the teacher taught them was how to fall and get back up. And so often in leadership, we get these great opportunities, but then we're kind of left out on an island to ourselves and we don't know what to do about them. And so what I appreciated was when they thrust, and it did feel like a thrust into this opportunity, they also gave me a mentor and a leader that walked alongside of me and, taught me about things like body language, taught me about skills, taught me my presentation skills. And I would literally be presenting before the senior leadership team. At one point, I got to present, it's a very, very large firm I was a part of. I got to present to the president, and he's in the back telling me to slow down and calm down and just speak. And so just having somebody in your corner that's looking at you and saying, "Nope, you're going too fast. Just calm down. It's going to be okay." Like there's nothing like that in the world when you know someone is in your corner and their whole goal is to see you succeed. And so while I had this huge challenging opportunity, I was also paired with a mentor who was guiding me through those moments.
That's huge. And I think we're all just we all know what it's like to build the plane as you're flying it. And so it's really good to have somebody hand you the right tools, isn't
Yes, right.
it? And so that's huge. I think that if we are being asked
Mhm.
to lead something in a new way, in this particular group, they were burnt out. There were a lot
Yes.
of things that weren't
Yes.
favorable, and you were thrust into a position that wasn't favorable. So I think that we can learn from this. If it's not provided, why don't we ask for it?
Yeah.
I will do this if you will walk alongside me, if I
Mhm.
can count on you,
Yeah,
because then you know you have a chance of winning.
that's right.
So Let's talk about something in your article. You talk about one of the frameworks, which is Kubler-Ross change curve.
It's a big
So
word.
we'll figure out what that is. But this is where it helps you to move in amidst an environment
Mhm.
where there's frustration,
Yes.
experimentation, and even into integration. So,
Yeah.
what have you learned about the emotional realities of leading change? Because it's very real, both for yourself and your team members.
Yeah. I mean, here's something people don't tell you. And I think when we go through change ourselves, we know and experience it that change is so emotional. But we don't talk about that in the business world. We never, almost never talk about the emotional side of change. So when a leader makes a change all the way at the top, and in this particular organization, it had to touch over 1,000 people. Whenever we made a change, over 1,000 people need to know about it.
Wow.
So, as a result, we had to start with the understanding that change is emotional. And this Kubler Ross change curve is a really beautiful way of looking at it, even though it's a very hard name to say, because what it does is it overlays the um, stages of grief over the stages of change. And what we don't realize is that stages of grief and the stages of change are almost the same when we think about the emotions we feel. So when someone tells us something is changing, the very first thing that happens is we're shocked. We're like,
Mhm.
no way, this cannot be happening. This isn't right. Right? That's our first emotion as somebody who likes to have control, as people who like to have our little order in the world. It feels very chaotic when someone says, hey, we're moving your cheese. Everything's changing. The ladder was over there. Now it's moved to over there. Immediately we feel afraid, right?
Mm.
We feel shock. And then we go into denial. Oh, that can't be right. There's no way. I'm not going to change until someone comes directly to me and tells me. Until that happens, nothing. I'm not moving, right? Then we go into anger and blame. So we start blaming other people. We start getting really frustrated. And then, this is the big challenge. We go into fear and bargaining. So, and again, let's think about grief. It's the very same steps and the same stages. But here's what happens. Typically, around that time between anger and fear, when someone is going through those emotions, we tell ourselves, let's write that person off. They're not going to go on this change journey with us. And we literally write off groups of people as unwilling to change or unable to change or just impossible to deal with. But what we don't understand is that if we'll allow them to go through that journey, even down into depression, eventually what happens is exploration. Then they move to decision, and then they move to integration. And when they move to integration, they start to say, I made the change. Here's why it's better. Let's do this. And so what I realized was that I was going to have to live that journey not only with these 100 project managers, but with over 1,000 people in that business unit that needed to go through this change with us. And it wasn't a one size fits all, right? So it hit us all differently. If you think about the law of diffusion of innovation, right? You always have your early adopters, and then you have your midstream adopters and your late adopters. And so everyone's going to go through this change journey differently, and our plan had to allow for them to be able to absorb what we were asking them to do.
This is such a valuable insight to have because so many times we look for buy-in too early,
Yeah.
and it has everything to do with how people process. And I have found that there are people that most of us are change averse.
Yeah.
We just are. So we go in with that understanding, then our expectations are there accordingly. But then it's the way people process. So the deep thinkers, the people that are not necessarily going, the
Yeah.
ones who are less outspoken,
Right.
even, they're busy processing it. It takes them longer.
Yes.
And it could look like they are reticent to change when actually they're just slower at processing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we label people too quickly,
Yeah.
we risk losing some very important, because we need all of the dynamics at the table.
Yes.
Not just the people that are saying yes to us, but the people who are maybe slower to bring their yes to the
Mm-hmm.
table. So it's about connecting with them, expectations.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's really, really important at that season and always
Mm-hmm.
is freedom to ask questions.
Yes.
What is it that we need to be asking questions of them?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what it is that you need to know that helps you to really grasp this new vision, this new direction.
Yeah.
What are the things, what can we do to make it easier?
Mm-hmm.
When we take the initiative to ask these questions,
Mm-hmm.
it says to them, Well, you know what? My employers understand the difficulty of this transition.
Yes.
And again, that speaks value to them. So this is really, really important. I hope we take time to study this particular framework,
Yeah.
even though I can't pronounce it. All right. So this is kind of interesting. I love this in your article. And I'm going to quote you. It was not my superior who held all the power, but my subordinate. This is all about who has the influence. So this is interesting. I'd love for you to unpack this for us.
Yeah, so what's interesting is in this particular organization, um, it was very bottom up. So leader would say from on high, we're going to do this, and it would be almost like this empty echo chamber, right, where people it just was not trickled down, and people would not do it. Now, if the people at the bottom believed in the change, then you would see that change ripple up through the organization. So you kind of have to know what kind of organization you sit in. In this particular organization, they were very driven towards the frontline workers, and the people in the front line had the biggest voice. And I thought that was really cool. But it also made it really hard because when it was time to change, I had people come up to me and tell me, one lady in particular, we're going to call her Cassandra, she said, not only am I not willing to change, but I've seen 3 versions of this. I've been here over 20 years, and I'll just outlive this change. I'll just wait it out, I'll outlive it, and good luck. And I, after getting over my own change curve of shock and denial that was a conversation we were having, I realized I had a real opportunity. Wow, you've seen this organization try to do something similar to this 3 different times. Would you say all 3 of those times have been a failure? Yeah. Awesome. Then guess who is the perfect person to partner with for you to help me bring this change about? It's you, Cassandra. You're the one. You're the lady. You're going to help me bring this change about because you're the one that's already seen it done poorly. And so you can help me do it the right way. And to my surprise, Cassandra actually said yes. I think she was shocked that the negativity didn't run me away and that I was actually willing to hear really what wasn't working and why had this failed so many times before. And so she partnered with me surprisingly on this initiative, but it wasn't like it got easy. A lot of what I had to do was wade through all the negative comments and all the past kind of terrors, if you will, of change that she had experienced in the organization so we could surface those and do it differently.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's not the idea, it's how the idea gets executed,
Hmm.
and that's where you lose people.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's really brilliant that you have people who are actually the boots on the ground.
Hmm.
They should have a voice.
That's right.
And so whether they protest or not, we should invite them to the table
Yeah.
in some very important ways. So that's awesome.
Well, and I want to comment on that for a second because I think what happens oftentimes is we think, let's go find the people that are for us and smile at us all the time, and let's ask them to be a part of the change. And what we actually need to do is find some of the people that scowl at us because maybe we've stepped on their toes in the past. We haven't included them. We haven't brought their voice to the table. And so by having some of those dissenting opinions early in the conversation, what it actually does is it allows us to have a better solution when we bring it to the masses because we've gotten to hear the dissension along the way and we're not hearing it as a surprise at the end. So that's kind of a key part of change is making sure you're bringing the right people to the table at the right time so they can speak into this and you don't get surprised at the end by thinking you've created this beautiful thing and then you find out that it's not what we want or need. And so I knew that having Cassandra there was going to be hard, but it was the exact challenge we needed in order to be successful.
I mean, that's the importance of focus groups,
Yeah.
okay? Because otherwise we end up in an echo chamber and we create something that really at the end of the day, you just wasted a lot of time and money because you didn't understand the dissension. You didn't understand, you don't know what you don't know.
That's
How
right.
many times does that ring true in our lives?
Yeah.
And so I love the idea of inviting people because here's what you're going to do. They're going to come into that room with a little bit of buy-in already.
Yes.
Because they're thinking, okay, they want to hear my voice. And so they're going to reposition their argument to you. They're going to say it in such a way that, okay, I want to be a part of the solution. And so it's one of those little caveats that can happen if we intentionally invite. And doesn't it make sense that we should invite the boots on the ground?
Yes.
I can remember walking into Williams-Sonoma, and I go to pay, and the charge card machine was at a complete flat, and it was up high. And I said, I can't really see this. And the woman at the cash register said, yes, I know. If only they would have asked us, we would have told them, put it on a slant, because what's happening is the lights above are glaring the screen. That one
Wow.
thing. So the boots on the ground, the people that are carrying this out, they are the ones that are going to have to deal with our decisions. We need to invite them in early on
Yes.
and determine the right point to bring them in, of course,
Yes.
but save us a lot of time and money and wasted money.
And heartache.
They did eventually fix it.
Yeah.
All right, let's continue with this, because this is really good stuff. So you highlight that people often need to hear something 7 to 10
Yeah.
times before it truly sinks in.
Yes.
So what I would always tell myself is, Colleen, when you get to the point of being tired, you need to say it even more.
Yes.
And for leaders who are particularly navigating change, what does consistent communication look like in practice? And how can they avoid feeling like a broken record themselves?
Yeah. One of the things that I realized very early on, again, think about communicating to over 1,000 people. You are going to have people that are out that day. They're not going to get the message. So what we actually created was what we called a walking around deck. And it was the opportunity to disseminate this to leaders and then have their leaders continue to disseminate this down so that people could actually interact with the change that we were making. We had a website where people could go on, see a video, they could engage with what the change was, leave comments and questions behind. And then our goal was to get back to them within 24 to 48 hours so that it wasn't, again, just submitting something and never hearing anything back, which would probably be worse than just not asking at all. So we knew that we had to create some levers, right, that would allow people to interact with the change. And then one of the things that I believe is a huge innovation principle is working open. So at any time, they could come and see where we were at on the change journey. They could see what was going on. Were we ahead? Were we behind? When was the next communication to them? When was the next town hall? When were we going to talk about this again? And so they actually got to go on the change journey with us. A lot of times change happens in a black box and people are like, I guess I'll just show up and everything will be different. And that's not really fair to people. And so when we love and care about people, we need to take them on the journey with us, and they need to feel like they're a part of the change. They need to feel like they're not excluded from the change and left out, and it's just going to be a massive surprise for them. They need to go on the journey with us. And so we need to create environments where they can check in on their own. They don't have to call you every time to ask what's happening or what's going on. They can get information and status reports and updates, and they can even know how they're going to be brought along in the change. And so what we would typically do is we had different calls, different meetings, different ways that they could engage with the change happening. So by the time we got to the end of change, there was nobody saying, what? We made this huge change? What do you mean? Everyone's like, yep, I know exactly that this was coming. I know the dates it was coming, or at least the time frame. And if it didn't land at that time frame, I know why. And that way everyone's nodding their head, but by the time the change is made, instead of in shock, right? Because we want them to go through that change curve all along the way. We don't want to do all these changes and then start the change curve all the way at the end of the project. We need to back everything up and tell them as soon as we think we're going to move in this direction so that they can see the whole change journey laid out before them.
Hey, better they nod their heads than scratch their heads, right? I mean, surprises do not create security. And
That's right.
I loved that you strategically think about this as far as who's going to be impacted by this change.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody that is impacted needs to be included.
That's right.
And how it helps you understand how and when and what to disseminate in the way of information. So
That's right.
This is where a communications person is really pivotal in this. What you communicate, when you communicate, and all of that has to be done very carefully, but very consistently.
That's right.
So that's a great plan.
Yeah, and there's a great framework out there that you can look up. It's called ADKAR, and you can actually survey people around their ability to change and their willingness to change. Because oftentimes we think it's a will thing, like, oh, they're just not willing. Sometimes it's a skill thing.
Yeah.
Like they don't have the skills to change to what we're asking them to do. So part of what we were asking during this change journey is, do we need to update people's skills in this area? Maybe their will is there, but they just don't have the skills. Sometimes people have the skill, but they're never going to get the will. We needed to know that early so that we knew how to engage them and see if we could bring them along in the journey. So ADKAR, ADKAR, is a really cool framework for change out there that you can look at. But one of the first things we did was survey people and to ask, are you even willing to go on this journey with us in the first place? And if you are, do you have the skills and capabilities to do it? And I think it's a really cool, respectful way to bring about really big changes that we were about to make in the department so that we knew that everybody would be on board with us.
Super. That's great. Monitor the situation, understand what you're dealing with, and then, help. They might have the capacity, they just don't have the specific skill. What do we need to do to round them out?
That's right.
So that they can run with this vision. So speaking of vision for the future, here you found yourself in a new season where, you have this vision, and yet there's all this uncertainty because the path is new, the journey is new, the vision, you know where you're going, but there's a lot of uncertainty. So you talk about a section about creating a vision for the future, even when the path is not fully clear. So how do leaders deal with that? How do they cast a vision during these times of uncertainty, especially when you don't have all the answers yet?
Yeah, so something we did on one page was we created a one-page vision that would go all around the company, and we even shared it with people outside of our department. So business partners, people that, we're in technology, so everything we created was for someone else. We didn't create anything for ourselves, truly. It was for marketing or for another group. Maybe it was frontline workers. So we had to let them know that we were on a journey of change. Part of the reason we were on this journey is because we surveyed them and they told us how bad we were. They told us all the different areas that we were failing in. And so we knew that we had to get from not great to consistent, clear, and able to work really, really well with them. So we actually made this one-page vision, and on it had people with question marks. They didn't know what was going on. What is this data? Where did it come from? Why is it here? What do I do with it? To I understand clearly where my project is at. I understand clearly what's going on. I know how to articulate the status of things and what's happening. And so we had to create this one pager. And when you looked at it, you would laugh because it was people running around hitting each other and question marks over their heads, and they just didn't know what was going on. But we drew this bridge, and on the other side of the bridge, it was people operating with efficiency and clarity, and they were working together. And so this was the mantra we used to show them how to get from here to there. Hey, we know that things are not great today. We're not denying it. We're not hiding it. We're showing you we know. But we're going to build this bridge to get to the other side. And on the other side of it, we're showing you what our aspiration is, that we work well together, that communication is clear, that the right systems exist for you to be able to communicate in. So we, in that way, created this bridge to the other side, if you will. And it was a really cool way to just communicate. We hear you. We get it. We know that things are broken, but here's our journey to get them fixed. And then we even went in and told them what we were fixing year over year in a more detailed plan later. But that's kind of the idea, is to lay it out so that everyone knows what is our true north, where are we going, and how are we going to get there.
I love it. I mean, you might not understand the path, but if the clarity that you gave your team was important, compassion, clarity, courage, conviction, all of those things enter in to help us navigate change well. We don't have to fear it if we are saying just wide open. I love that your company said, we accept that we're not in denial. We accept that this is what we have been doing wrong, but at the same time, we have faith for a future. So all of that can turn out well. And as it did, we know the end of that story. It did. And you led well, and you're to be commended for it. So, wow, this has been a lot. I know you've been taking notes, and I love that you have given us some very useful tools, very practical things to use. And, when you think about Thrive Today, one of the things that we strive for is to be practical and to give you tools, resources that will help add value to you, help you to lead well. And this is why we say we are here to challenge you, to coach you, and to cheer you on. All of those things. This is what we want to be for you. And in fact, we have a membership program, and lots of our Thrive Tribe girls are on this program. And if you go on to our website, thrivetoday.com, you can find more out about our community, because we are here to serve women like you, women who lead and believe. So as we sign out today, Natalie, it was a joy listening to you, all of your wisdom. Girls, don't forget to thrive.